Okay, let's roll. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Powerful Pivots. I'm Janette Ciborowski, the Silicon Valley Club president, and we're excited that you were able to take some time out of your day to join us for this exciting event. One thing I want to say is that we're always looking for great volunteers. Events like this are put on by volunteers and speakers, and we really appreciate them. So you can always find us if you'd like to get involved. And without further ado, I will welcome our speakers today. First, we have Nicole Smith, who's a life coach and founder of Smitn, a coaching and advisory practice specializing in providing relatable and culturally relevant coaching and personal development services to high-achieving women leaders and their allies. Before launching Smitn, Nicole held high-profile marketing and communication positions in well-known companies, including the Walt Disney Company. During her almost 20 years in the entertainment and hospitality industries, Nicole led marketing departments at various sports properties, including NASCAR, a Major League Baseball team, and a Women's National Basketball Association team before launching Smitn in 2017. Nicole is originally from Richmond, California. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication Studies from UCLA and an MBA from the University of Michigan. She's a certified coach and a member of the National Speakers Association. She also serves on multiple boards, including the Alumni Board of Governors at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. So thank you so much for Nicole for being with us. I'd also like to introduce our co-host, Renata Gomide. She's a strategy and consultant principal at Accenture. She's also career chair on the University of Michigan Alumni Club of Silicon Valley. And she, in her spare time, she writes about balance, wellness, and purpose in her blog, Ideas for Divas. Throughout her life, she has moved 8 times to different cities in Brazil and the US, and she pivoted her career at least 4 times, and it's constantly redesigning her life for more fulfillment. So definitely someone with great perspective. I do want to make one quick note before we get started. We do have an hour session with Nicole available. As part of this talk, all you have to do is use hashtag #UMSiliconValley on your LinkedIn, posting some sort of insight that you brought in today, and we will be sure to contact you and with an hour session with Nicole. So thanks, Nicole, for providing that.
No problem.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here and ask if anyone has any questions during the time, you can drop them in the chat. If you're feeling really bold, you can unmute yourself and ask as we go on. But let's start with you, Renata. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and let's say your biggest pivot.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to see some known faces. As you already told my brief story, so I'm not going to drain talking about myself. I'm originally from Brazil. I moved to Ann Arbor to pursue my MBA at Ross. Moved back to Brazil after the MBA, and then I moved to the Bay Area where I have been living for the past 5 years. So my biggest pivot was really when I moved my career from finance to consulting. I prioritized wellness. While I was doing that, I also moved to different cities at least 3 times. So I'm just giving some context on everything that happened. So right after the MBA, I got my dream job as a finance manager for a global healthcare company. And after a few months, I was not super fulfilled with that job. There were some reasons why I was not. Basically, the role scope changed since they hired me, or they gave me an offer 8 months before. Also, I learned that although I was hired in a global program, the HR or the company in Brazil, they didn't welcome MBAs as much because the employees felt threatened by the MBAs. They didn't understand why we were valuable for the company. So And the other thing is that I also learned that there's a big difference between working on the company headquarters. That's like when they hired me, that's the vibe that I got. But like when you go work for a subsidiary, you don't have that strategic decision power. So when I left my job, I moved back to my mom's house. What It's not a big deal in Brazil at all. I'm not saying that I felt super comfortable with that. I think that she was very happy with having me back after 2 years living abroad. But I was in another state. I traveled around 14 countries, and I prioritized wellness in my life while I was trying to find a role that was more aligned to what I wanted to do. So I started exercising, eating healthier, and this became a habit because, well, I had time in my hands while I was looking for a job and traveling, right? So I think that this was key for my life when I pivoted to consulting, because this continued to be a pillar. If I'm traveling, if I'm working long hours, I'm still like eating health, I'm still working out, and that is a big, big portion of my life. And there's another thing that is actually generated is like my interest to talk about wellness and to share about the experiences that I have. And that's why I created my blog, Ideas for Divas, few years ago, that I talk about balance, career, purpose, and also wellness.
I mean, that seems like that worked out for you, Renata, but I want to know about, I mean, change isn't really easy. It's actually really hard. They always say to develop a habit, at the minimum, it's 21 days straight. But what would you say is the hardest part about making a change?
I think that the hardest part is really stay true to yourself and ignore what people may be saying about your change. Because I think that the most pivotal change that I had in my life, being like moving from Brazil to Ann Arbor to do my MBA, or this other change that I just described, or when I was in São Paulo and decided to move back to the Bay Area, because these are not only career changes, they're also like personal changes. I had everybody around me saying that I was crazy, that that was not going to work. And when people tell you this type of things, they are really thinking about themselves, because they would not really have the strength or the perseverance to do a change like that. So what I would say is really don't worry about what people say. And I think that if you can not tell people about your change or what you're planning, I think it's even better, because you're going to find a lot of people around you who will not really help you or give you some good words that everything is possible.
Okay, let's bring in Nicole here, because I want to know, how does someone really know they're ready for a change? I mean, what if they're just having a bad day? Like, how do you really know it's time to take that step?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things, but one of the things you probably want to look at is what you probably deal with in your work all the time, your S curve, right? So, an S has the curve at the bottom. We've seen this. People talk about the S curve when they talk about technological advancement. We might see the S curve in project management. It's the same thing in your career and in your life, right? So in the beginning at the bottom, you have a learning curve, right? It's kind of slow. You're getting around that bend. And then all of a sudden, as you get mastery, it starts to accelerate and you move higher and higher. And that's where all the action's happening. Then all of a sudden, kind of slows down and it takes another turn and it levels out. So it looks like an S, right? So if you can track your progress and track where you are in your career or in your life, and if you're at the top of your curve, that's a signal that it's time to move on, right? You're at the top of your S curve. But I also think it's important to add here that, the idea of wanting to change and the idea of being ready to change are not necessarily the same thing, right? So many people probably signed up and came to this call because they're like, yeah, I want to change. So you have something you want to do. It's all very theoretical. And I would say when you're ready to change, you have that theoretical desire, of course, right? You want it, but there's a couple other things that you're looking for. You're looking for being committed to the result you're going after, right? You know that you want it and you'll do whatever you have to do or willing to do to get there. And if you're willing to put in the effort required to get that result, you're open to new possibilities and willing to learn new things, because again, you're going to be starting a new S curve, and you're willing to get uncomfortable and possibly have to change your thoughts and your actions that you've been doing for a really long time. And it's okay, whatever part you're at, if you're that wanting to change or willing to change and willing to make a change piece, but it is important to know where you are and to get started from that place. Because I think that's where people, find a lot of frustration, is that place between wanting and ready.
Yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared just thinking about that. What do you think, Renata? How do you know it's time?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything what Nicole was talking about. And I think that that gap between knowing that you're ready and being ready, like it's really, it brings out all the frustration. I think that there are two situations that I think that at least points you that a change is needed. And maybe you are not ready, but at least start pointing to you. So one is like when you don't feel happy or fulfilled and on your current state. And when I say fulfilled, like I not try to bring one of those things like, oh, a perfect life. I really see that happiness comes in the routine that we have every day. And I do think that fulfillment, it's more about like your inner state. It's more related to the progress that you are making and your inner state and how you feel excited about the things that you are doing. So if you're not feeling that what you're doing is actually bringing you joy, fulfillment, happiness, I think maybe it's starts like you should be contemplating a change, and probably there will be this gap until you're ready to actually change. Another area I would think about is really like when your current path is not really leading you to where you want to be. So either like a goal or a dream. For example, so you may want to lose weight. So if you want to lose weight, you know that you need to start exercising, you need to eat healthy. So we all know that, right? But like if your current state is not leading you there, then you need to change. Because if that's your goal, if that's your dream, and there will be, again, you have to be ready to do that change. But I think that these are the two situations that you can start thinking that it's time for a change.
Okay, so I think we've talked about how to sort of assess, is it just a Monday, or how do you really know that your time is here? So once you've decided, and I think a lot of people here are probably thinking, this is where we're at. You've decided it's time and you're ready to make that change. What's next? Like when you think about advice, are there resources people can kind of consult before, as they kind of build their library to get ready for this pivot?
Yeah, so I classify changes in two types of changes. One would be like the easy change. And the easy change, it's not that it's easy for you to get where you want to be, but it's basically, at least where you want to be. So for example, if you want to go to grad school, it's not going to be an easy path, but you can talk to people, you can go visit schools, you build your plan, and you can make it happen. You know where you want to be. This is the easy change. There's a hard change. The hard change is that you are uncomfortable. It can be with your career, with your relationship, but you don't really know where you want to be. You don't know what is the change that is needed. So I'm going to focus on this one to answer this question, because I think that I have had interesting experiences, really leverage some resources. This would be, for example, if you think about career, like you like your team, you have opportunities, but you are not as excited as when you started in your job. So this is the type of things that I hear a lot of times from friends, from work, etc. So I'm going to talk about like one of the books. I have two books here that have helped me. So you guys probably heard of Simon Sinek and the Golden Circle finding. He talks about like the whys in the circle, and then you have the how around it, and then you have the what. So he has a book, or his team has a book that's called Finding Your Why. So this book actually has a framework that helps you to look at your life in a holistic way. It's not only your career. Career is a big part of it, but it's not only your career, but things that you like to do since like growing up until where you are today, and you start picking up some of the patterns that you can identify to really define your why. So I spent probably like 3-4 hours doing this framework, and for this one, you need someone to help you, someone that doesn't know you a lot, because they can kind of influence your thinking process, but like a good friend that doesn't know all your life, so be ideal. So when, for example, when I did this exercise, I was not feeling as great as my job as I used to. And my why was really like to use my experience to inspire others so they can realize their own potential. So I realized that this was actually lacking, and that's why I was not feeling super fulfilled at that time of my life. So what I did was actually I joined the alumni club from the University of Michigan, Silicon Valley, like this team here, and helping organizing career events, really helping other people to develop is something that's really fulfilling for me. And another thing that I started doing in addition to work was really like starting my blog, really sharing about my like balance, wellness, and finding purpose. And I also took some class at Stanford in areas that were unrelated to my work, for example, design, entrepreneurship. So when I started actually taking those classes and opened my mind to different areas, I started actually finding other things that I like to do at work, and that led to a pivot in my career, in my job. That was in the same company, but that was one thing that led to another. Another book that I'm going to talk about is this one. It's Design Your Work Life. So there's another book that is same authors that is Designing Your Life. This is Designing Your Work Life. So I got this actually last year when Nicole and I started talking about this event. I thought that I needed to learn a little bit more about pivots. There are multiple very interesting frameworks here. So the one that I'm going to talk about is really reframing your problems. Because sometimes we can get really dramatic about problems in terms of like, for example, if you're not happy at work, oh, my boss is a jerk, I'm never going to go anywhere if I stay here. So it's a lot of drama, right? There's no action on this problem. So if you start asking yourself questions like, what is really going on? And you ask this why kind of 5 times, you really can break this problem into something that's more actionable. So for example, the same problem could be rephrasing like, how might I find mentors and sponsors in other areas of the organization? My boss is not going to help me. That will help me to grow. So then you can take action and you start moving.
I like how that works for designing your work life. I think I'll hop to one question we have in the chat, and it's for Nicole. Could you elaborate on being ready to / the need to pivot, and how do you balance this with all the other life responsibilities that we deal with, like parenting and family and all those other additional obligations? How do you make that time work?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, from my perspective, it's all life. And I think that's one of the things that if you want to make a powerful pivot, you have to kind of take away the conventional wisdom of I'm going to think about what I want to do first and then build everything around what I want to do. I think it's much more powerful to think about what do I want my life to look like first, and then fit all the pieces in. Now, obviously your kids and your family, they're kind of permanent fixtures, right? You're not really going to get rid of those, but give them their place. Place your big rocks first. And you may be familiar with that term, place your big rocks. So that means take all the things that are super important to your family, your well-being, your health, and place those big rocks first. Your job may also be a big rock. Because the idea is, if you think of your life as a jar, if you put your big rocks in first, you can pour in the pebbles and the gravel and all the other things, right? And everything will fit. If you try to put all the pebbles and the gravel in first, and then you try to fit in the big rocks will never make it. And I can tell you that your life will not be fulfilling or what you want it to be if you leave those big rocks out. So chances are part of the reason why you feel ready to pivot and need to pivot is because your rocks aren't placed properly, right? So I would take an inventory. I would go back and say, okay, if I could craft this any way that I want to craft it, how would I show up for my kids? How would I show up for my spouse? Most importantly, how would I show up for myself? And start there and then build everything backwards. It can be a scary thing because we've been very much conditioned to think that like our job comes first. Whether you're doing that consciously or subconsciously, you're probably putting your job first. And so take a moment to take that off the table and say, okay, if I could work anywhere, do anything, do it any way I want to do it, what would it look like? And I encourage starting from that place. But as far as being ready and needing the readiness and the needing, I think once you have a very clear vision about where you want to go, that want, that need, and that desire will grow. Like once you see something you want to move towards versus something you're running from, the motivation becomes a lot higher and a lot more intense, and you'll find yourself wanting, very much wanting to make this new vision happen. But it starts with creating that first.
And now, Nicole, as oh, do we have someone asking a question on camera?
Uh-oh. It can happen.
It could happen. Okay. Well, questions in the chat or questions if you want to pop on camera are always welcome. Nicole, I mean, I have to imagine you've seen it all, right? From your perspective as a life coach. And when people come to you, they're ready. So they're in a different sort of spot. I imagine that they're a little bit closer to figuring out they want to make the change. But what are some of the common sort of mistakes, or when people are at that point, or maybe even misconceptions they have about what it's like working with you and what can be accomplished?
Yeah, well, so I'm a life coach, right? So that means that I personally help executives or people preparing to be an executive define, create, and maintain success in any part of their life, right? So people come to me in all places in that spectrum. People have no idea what they want to do. They just know they want to do something, so they need my help in figuring it out. People who know exactly what they want to do and they're working on the execution, and people who are in progress, going directly towards whatever it is they want. Things are going well and they just need support, thought partnership. They want somebody to point out their BS and their blind spots, as I call it, so that nothing gets in the way between them and their goal or continuing on their path. But I think one of the big misconceptions that people have before they get started, get help, whatever it might be, is that you got to have it all figured out. And the truth of the matter is that nobody has it all figured out. So if that's one of the things right now that's holding you back from doing whatever it is that you want to do, especially if you keep telling yourself, I don't know how, I'm going to challenge you that you actually do know how. You do know how to take the next step. You may not know how it's all going to work out, but you know how to take the next step. And also what happens when we tell ourselves that we have to have it all figured out, then we probably don't. And then we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up and being negative about not knowing. And that's time that could be better spent making progress. And then the other piece of that too is then we don't ask for help because we feel like, oh, I should know this. So we don't go to our trusted friends, our mentors. We don't seek out help from hired help, whether you hire a coach or not, or, listen to the advice of others, because deep down inside, you may be feeling bad because you feel like you should know this. And so I just want to say that, it's okay to not know. In fact, it's probably a great place to not know, because that means all the possibilities are available. So I think that is probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. We have a question in the chat from Jasmine. What are the biggest ways to tackle imposter syndrome?
Oh gosh. Well, that's a question. I mean, I'm guessing that might be for me, Renata. I'll let you jump in on that one too. The biggest ways to attack imposter syndrome. So here's the thing, because we could do a whole nother kind of lunch and learn just on that by itself, right? I'll give you the short answer. So imposter syndrome is the idea that you are not owning your accomplishments. That's basically what it comes down to. Because in order to even have imposter syndrome, You have to be somewhere that you feel you don't belong, that you didn't earn, or that people are going to find you out. And I don't know about you, but I've never just magically ended up somewhere that people didn't want me to be in or that I didn't earn. Just doesn't quite happen that often. And if you do find yourself in a place that you didn't earn, then there's a reason for you being there. So I think number one is owning your accomplishments, taking stock of what you've done, and know that belonging doesn't come from other people. Belonging comes from yourself, and you can decide that you belong. And I know that might sound like, well, no, I can't, but I promise you, you absolutely can. It's about changing some of your thoughts and your approach. But that's a very short answer to a very like kind of layered, nuanced type thing. But feel free to shoot a follow up, and Renata, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'd say that imposter syndrome is there, right? I feel it all the time. Everybody I talk to, I think especially women, unfortunately, that's what happens. I totally agree with Nicole. Like if you are somewhere, it's because you should be there and you should own it. I think that if you need any help, it's always good to talk to a mentor just to kind of reinforce it, because sometimes you kind of feel that someone needs to tell you like, yes, you should be there. You should be talking on this meeting. You should be on the room where it happens or something like that, right? So I think it's if you can't find this strength inside of you in a certain moment, try to get it from someone else that you trust. I think that this really helps in my case, and like I really help my mentees on that. Sometimes I see a lot of people that they're doing amazing things, but they can't see it. So really rely on your network of people who will really help you, because there are a lot of people around that are not going to help you. So identify the mentors who will show you that, yes, you can do things, because sometimes it's just a reinforcement word that you need.
And I'll just jump in if I can really quick for like the guys in the room, because imposter syndrome is talked a lot in circles with especially women and especially people of color. But like, let's just be clear, like men and even white men get imposter syndrome. The study that was done many decades ago, they studied women, but imposter syndrome happens in men too. It's just that oftentimes the way that we deal with it is different. Right? Women are more likely to express it, more likely to probably buy into it a little bit more based on our socialization. But just know that it's not like a defect we have. Like, I just don't want anybody to walk away with like that impression whatsoever, is that anyone and everyone can have those moments. And really, they're just thoughts that you're having. And as you can take control of those thoughts and replace them with more, like Renata said, things that reinforce your achievements and reinforce who you are, it'll help a lot.
I like that you brought that up, Nicole, that it's not just a defect or a perceived defect. I know, I think working remotely, I sort of think about the motivational, I'm not like crazy with the motivational Post-it notes, but I do have sort of around my workspace to remind me I'm where I need to be, just like when I show up. So just so I know. So, okay, Nicole, as a former journalist, I'm a lifetime skeptic. And so I want to know now, we're going to get the lightning round. Can you tell us about your biggest pivot and how you sort of were able to get there?
Yeah. So, okay. A lot of people think my biggest pivot is that I'm a life coach, right? Because y'all remember, I worked in entertainment and sports marketing for a long time. My last role, I was a chief marketing officer at the WNBA team here in Dallas, right? So my entertainment and my sports career was fantastic and great, but I wanted something different. And so a lot of people would be like, oh, that transition from executive to executive coach might have been your biggest pivot, but it is not, however. My biggest pivot actually was much earlier in my life. So when I got out of high school, I actually went to Arizona State. That's not in my bio because I got my degree from UCLA. But as soon as I got to Arizona State, I hated it. I wanted to leave the day I got there. And everyone with influence in my life was like, no, you stick it out, you stay. Like, we don't care if you're miserable, you'll get over it, it'll be fine. And if you leave, you're never gonna go back, all these things, right? And even though all those people were telling me those things, I left anyway after 3 months. And guess what? I still graduated within 4 years from UCLA, had some community college time in that time, went on to get my MBA from Michigan. So I think things turned out pretty well for me, right? I'd say so. But even more than that, the big takeaway from that experience for me was trust in myself, right? So from that point forward, I knew that I could trust what I wanted for myself, regardless of what other people were saying. And that's a very, very powerful lesson to learn, especially that early. And I think for everyone on this call, I would say the vast majority of us, we have a moment in our life where we did trust ourselves. Things worked out fine. And it's important to like recognize that moment for what it is, because you'll sometimes need to go back to it, especially if you're making a huge degree of a pivot, to remind yourself that you can do it and that you can trust yourself about what you want and you can trust yourself to make it happen.
Wow, 18, 19-year-old Nicole was really making those steps early.
A rebel, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just
Way
a
to
pain
get it
in
out
my
of the
mom's
way.
butt. Yeah, right?
Yeah, way to get it out of the way early. So this all makes sense. Okay. Let's say, okay, what's today? It's Friday, right? And what if all of us on this call are like, what are we going to do to start this weekend on a whole different scale? Like, we got off this call with you guys. You really put us in the right mindset. We're ready to roll. Now I'm like, give me something I can really walk away with, where it's right now, today. What can we do to really start getting the ball rolling this weekend?
I was like, who goes first? I'll go first since I'm already off mute. So like, I would say the most important thing that you could do this weekend is going back to the question that we answered before, which is like sitting down and saying, what do I want my life to look like? And answering really important questions like, what do I want my life to look like? Who do I want to be in my life? And asking these really great questions like, who do I want to be? Not just what do I want to do? Like, who do I want to be? Who is this person I want to be? And how do I want to feel? Now, I'm the first person to tell you that feelings are not facts. But a very wise woman once told me that while feelings are not facts, they are data. And they're data that you need to make good decisions and to make powerful pivots. So you need that data. So don't leave that piece out. So if you could just sit down with yourself for, whether you take a walk or you can just find, 20, 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be a big ordeal, but really write down, and yes, write it like analog, pen to paper or pencil to paper, because there's something that happens in your brain when you do that. Really write down what you want your life to look like, and try not to judge yourself about it. Try not to put any limitations on it. Just really get it out there. And I think that's a really great start to whatever pivot you have coming up for yourself in the future, whether it's immediate or whether it's a little ways down the road.
What do you think, Renata?
Yeah, so it's very interesting that we didn't align on this answer, but my answer would be very similar to this. So I'm going to talk to you about a process that I did probably 2 months ago. It was a weekend, so you guys can do it tomorrow. That I was in a moment that I was like, okay, where do I want my career in life to be, right? I do think that I agree completely with Nicole. When I think about career, I don't think about my work, but like, how do I want my day to be? Like, how many hours do I want to work versus exercise versus the other things that I want to do and all that. And what I did was I asked myself questions. And I did it in a very analog way. I wanted it to be very fun. So I brought here some things for you guys to see what I did. I got Post-it notes for all the colors that you can imagine. I got some colorful pens. And I started asking myself questions. I would really recommend, like, don't open your computer, because then you get distracted with all the notifications. Get something that is fun. Put the music on, stand up. I had my standing desk on. I was up for 2 hours, was very productive. If you don't have a standing desk, just put the stuff in the wall. But like, just like boost your energy. So you are in a peak state, as Tony Robbins would say, like boost your physiology, be on a peak state before you start doing this. And the type of questions that I asked myself, there was nobody told me the way to do it. It was definitely inspiring in design thinking, but it was questions that I think that I needed the answer. So things, for example, what do I like to do? So I started, what am I good at? I had like a laundry list of things that what I'm good at, related to career. And then I had another stack that was like, what do I really like to do? And then I realized that some of the things that I'm great at work, I don't really like to do, but I do well. People like it, and I keep doing it. And those things, like for example, being a program manager, those things were all over my resume, my LinkedIn profile. I was like, but that's not where I want to be. So why am I still stuck on those things because people think that I do it well? So I started moving my post-its around in terms of like, okay, I know what I'm good at, but what do I really like to do? So I started moving them to a different column. And I started asking myself all the questions like, what don't I like to do or I'm not good at? And it was not ideally in terms of like, it's a technical skill that I don't have. It's more things like, well, I'm not good at performing well if I'm not challenged. I'm not good at dealing with politics, because those questions to me, or those post-it notes, were more in the sense like, do I want to change, or do I want to change to a team where I'm not going to need to do this type of things, or another company or another culture, etc. So these are the type of things that I had in my mind. Then I had a question about like, what is my priority today? And that was about like my life wrapping my job. For example, I want to be remote. I've been remote for a year. I don't want to go back to an office full time. And that was in the top of my list there. Then I had one that was really what I care about in terms of like in the world. What do I care about? And I actually learned that I write about wellness. I care about wellness, but I was not thinking about wellness as an industry that may be attractive. So I started thinking about that way. So could I actually merge my interests outside of work with my work and make something work? Yeah, I know, too many words in the phrase. Then I had another stack that was like what I wanted in my job. And I had a stack that was basically, what are my limiting beliefs? So going back to the imposter syndrome, I wrote down anything that would prevent me to be or to get where I wanted to be. I look at them, I toss it up, and I threw it away. Because I think that acknowledging that you have those things like preventing you to move forward is also important for you to move past them. So that was like a very fun 2 hours exercise. I invite you, if we were really thinking about a pivot, to go analog. You can be like, if you don't like post-it notes, get a beautiful notebook, beautiful pens. Think about the days that you were at school. I was a person who had like beautiful pens and pencils and stickers and all those things. It makes me happy if I have those around, and makes me more creative. So think about what makes you creative and go ideate in your life.
And I just
ideate on your life. I like it.
Sorry, just going to jump in there because while Renata was talking, she's right. Like having a process is super helpful. And I thought of a tool that I do have. I'll drop it in the chat for anybody who wants to, need some help or guidance in writing out like those things. Like, what do you want your life to look like, or what are you good at? It does require your email address. Don't worry, you can unsubscribe right away. It just comes to me. I'm happy to take you off if you don't want future emails. But I'll drop it in a chat as another tool that you can possibly use if you're ready to start writing down what you want your life to look like.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. We have another question in the chat. What are recommended resources for discovery to determine your career pivot or to stay on task? So we're talking books, any sort of podcast, or even it sounds like the link you're dropping in might be sort of useful in this space as well.
Yeah, I would say, the books that Renata offered up, those are fantastic. Find Your Why is really great. Design Your Life, Design Your Career, all of those things, also great. But there's all kinds of material out there. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is we discount ourselves because we're looking for something out there. We think the answer is out there. And what I would love for everybody to walk away from this call with is that, yes, there are things out there that can support you and help you, but that none of that is going to sustain you if it's not coming from you. So probably one of the reasons why you're ready to pivot or feeling like you need to pivot is because you've done a lot of what you think you should do and probably not enough of what you want to do or what you could do, right? So I would start inside and move out, and work from a place of what's possible for me, and watch your thoughts around what you're saying isn't possible for you. Explore that a bit more. And then obviously, the stuff that Renata brought up, I think is phenomenal. And those are great places to start.
And again, anyone who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, you can, or you can type it into the chat. I'm happy to work on my tiny reading skills. Along those lines, Nicole, when you talk about sort of the idea of you're at the point of a pivot, you've decided to really take a look at it. Do you find that clients are challenged, or if you think about the influence of a spouse or maybe a partner, how do your clients balance sort of where they think they're going and the things that they now realize they have to prioritize versus perhaps the interest of we talked about family earlier, but an interested party as a partner and where they have seen your collective vision going and it may not be the same place?
Yeah, I mean, it's about communication, right? So, but I think that before you can have, it's not a collective vision if you don't know what you're bringing to the pot, right? Like if you're just showing up and kind of like, well, what do you want? And I'll just do what you want, or I'm now going to wrap myself around that. Like everybody's got to come and bring their point of view so that everyone can have a little bit of what they want. It's not really collective or collaborative if no one's getting what they want, right? So I think a lot of people are just afraid to have a point of view. And that's like basically like nobody plans to be stuck, to be stressed, to be overwhelmed. And if you're not paying attention to how you're feeling, what you want, you're not willing to communicate that, if you're not willing to explore that, then basically you're buying a one-way ticket to stuck, stressed, overwhelmedville, right? So this is brave work. And if you want the life that you want and that you think you deserve and you want to have, then you're going to have to do brave things. And you're going to do some things that are a little bit different than maybe what you've been doing up until this point. So yeah, I think some people it's really easy just to say, oh, well, no, I can't because fill in all the blanks. We could sit here and come up with all the blanks of reasons why you can't. It's much more brave work to figure out the reasons how you could or why you can.
Right. And speaking of stuck, I'm sure that's something people are really, you kind of start off, you're feeling good. We've got a question in the chat. Let's say you want to change and you're trying to be ready, but then you come across that step where you feel stuck. And, then your forward momentum is really just kind of grinds to a halt. How do you sort of unstick yourself?
Unstick yourself. Yeah. So, okay. So this is going to be liberating for some people and maybe a little frustrating for others, but you're not stuck. You just feel that way. And the way to get the feeling of being stuck is a signal that you need to move. Make a move. It doesn't have to be the perfect move. It doesn't have to be the ultimate move, but you need to make a move. So asking yourself, what is the next smallest step I can take? What is the next thing I need to do? And if your brain wants to serve you, I don't know, then say, well, if I did know, or it's okay that I don't know if I had to guess, right? And do whatever that is. I think we talked about misconceptions earlier. And I think this is like 1A on misconceptions of like, I have to have it all figured out would be one. And 1A would be that there is a right way or a right choice. And the fact is the best choice you can make is the choice that's best for you and the one that you're going to follow through on. Because the funny thing about decisions is that we don't know how they're going to work out until they're done. So take the leap, do it, and do the next step. So if you are having that feeling of being stuck, it means you need to take a step, you need to move. It's kind of like a car stuck in the mud, right? Or stuck in the snow or something like that. The longer that car sits still and sinks in, it's just getting deeper and deeper. Now you don't want to spin your wheels a bunch of like useless motion, right? But what is the next purposeful step that you can take to get yourself out of that ditch? That's what I would say.
Stay out of the quicksand.
Stay out of the quicksand.
Stay out of the quicksand. It's good advice. What do you think? I think I would be remiss on a panel. This is, a very unique panel as far as in the 5 or 6 years I've been on the Michigan board, where we have all women, right?
Yay.
Yeah, I know, yay. What do you think is sort of, when you're working with your clients, I know you specialize in women and being able to also have these utilities for women of color particularly. What have you seen a difference sort of in people you've been talking to over the past year with sort of all of the just collective issues that have been happening? And is it sort of have you seen any sort of trends that are impacting the workplace, or anything you could speak to with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think nothing's new, nothing's different. Like for the people who have been experiencing it and living it, it's the same, right? Nothing has truly changed just yet. We hope we're moving in that direction. I think that what we're seeing now is, from my client perspective, is I'm seeing more employers who want to invest in their talent and are willing to invest to retain talent. And they're starting to say, okay, maybe we haven't done enough for the women in our office because they have unique needs, or the people of color in our office because they have unique needs, or there's people who don't fit those categories who are like, hey, I want to be better. I want to be a better colleague. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better person. How can I do that? And I need a safe space to work on that. And so my work and working with me can be that, right? Since we work on any aspect of life that you want to improve on. So that's one of the things that we can do. But I think at the end of the day, it's like Brene Brown says, who we are is how we lead. So the more we work on just being good people and being the best person you can be, and being open to other possibilities and showing empathy and showing up for yourself and showing up for your team and your colleagues, I think that's helpful. And I think, one of the things that I see is a little bit tricky and dangerous right now is people in this idea of implicit bias. And the idea that, everybody has biases, it's fine. And it's like, well, yeah, it's fine that you have them, but it's not fine for you to ignore them. And it's not fine for you not to challenge them. And so I would just say to anyone and everyone, not only just your implicit bias, but just the way you think. We all have like these operating systems, and some of us are operating on like, Windows 10 or something. I don't know, like a pretty old operating system. So like, check your thoughts, check what's going through your head, check your bias, check, where does your brain go when you walk into a room or you meet different people. So that's kind of the work that I think more people are open to and more people are doing. So I think that's trending in the right direction.
Okay, that's a good change to hear then. I feel like that's positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's one thing I do want to sneak in here and promote is the Silicon Valley board. We are trying to think about how we can provide events that are really helping people holistically. And so along these lines, we do have an event coming up on June 25th about building a service-oriented career and how to make a lasting impression with your legacy in a different way. In case the pandemic has brought different thoughts to the forefront. So definitely check out our newsletter and our social to stay tuned for that event on June 25th. We've got a new question in the chat. And it's, he says, I've done a lot of analyzing and reflection through books such as Designing Your Life and What Color is Your Parachute, as well as life interviews. However, I still find myself stuck and unsure of the next step. How do you balance self-reflection versus taking action, even if the action isn't necessarily perfect?
I was like, okay, I'll jump in on this one. Renata, tell me if you have anything to add. But I would say, so here's how we sometimes trick ourselves. We sometimes trick ourselves that we're doing the work of change when we're reading and we're thinking about it so much, it feels like we're doing. So I would definitely check in to see what action you're actually taking. Like, keep taking action, don't stop, right? So reaching for that next book can be great as far as collecting knowledge and researching, but the higher value cycle would take you to what's the next step that's moving me towards my goal. We've been, again, socialized our whole life. There's like templates, right? go to school from K to 12, go to college. There's all these like steps that you have to take. And so what to remember is you're going to get to a point in your life where it's not going to be a template you can borrow. It's going to be a blueprint that you draw. And so are you drawing? Are you moving to the next thing? And so again, just check and make sure that it's not another book you're reaching for. It's not an external answer you're reaching for, that you really truly are like taking action, doing that next thing. What's going to move you forward? Because it can get tricky. You can feel like you're doing a lot of work and you're actually not doing the work.
What do you think, Renata?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, don't think about being perfect, because I know that you put the perfect word there. I'm a perfectionist, trying not to be a perfectionist in everything in my life. And I think about this every day on how to stop it, because just thinking about when we are in school, we're thinking about that A+ and the perfect grade. And when we go to life, it's not only about that. So I mentioned that I have a blog. I probably spent 1 year ideating on how to build a blog. I would go to my Stanford classes. I would have like the plan. I have like beautiful business canvas with everything that I was going to do, and there's nothing was happening. I had ideas. I have papers. Until one day, I sat in front of my computer. I got one of these blog providers. I paid a fee. I started the website. Then I changed the name. Then I changed the logo. Then I changed a bunch of other things until it has the shape that it has today. So just take the first step and don't overthink it. You don't have to overplan it. Just take the first step, because then once you take the first step, the others will follow and you'll figure out what else you have to do.
It's so true.
So we got to start paying for the website hosting and use that as a metaphor for the rest of our life to get us unstuck. All right, that's great. I know that we're closing down to the top of the hour, and I want to be mindful of everyone's lunch breaks potentially, or the time they carved out. Nicole and Renata, are there any sort of final sort of takeaways or thoughts as we go into this weekend with our action items that we're going to work on? And I'm going to go get my Post-it notes.
Yeah, work on those action items, of course. And I think if there's one thing that, I would say, if you don't walk away from any of this stuff, you can't retain anything else that we talked about today. I think the one thing is to trust yourself. You can absolutely do it. And just to take that one step, like whatever that thing is, just do one small thing, because 1% every day makes a huge difference. So just take that next action.
Okay, baby steps.
Yeah, just micro steps. If you think about little things, it doesn't need to be huge. It doesn't need to be scary. You just keep moving. And just in addition to believing in yourself, just stop the other voices around you. Sometimes it's great to just renew your friends, because they may not be bringing you good stuff. So always think about like if the people around you is actually lifting you up and helping you to move forward. Because if they are not, you should just, there's a change that you need to do, because otherwise they're just going to be dragging you back.
All right, surround yourself with positivity, it seems like. Well, that's great. If we don't have any more last questions in the chat, I want to thank you all for taking the time to come and join us. Renata and Nicole, we appreciate the time that you've given us as well for the Silicon Valley Alumni Club. And we hope to see you all at future events virtually and hopefully in person soon. Go Blue.
Thank you. Great to see you all. Thank you.